there is 100 people willing to tell you how to do your business right, quote unquote. And it's almost always wrong because that's what works for them. And whatever works for them may work for 1% of the population and it won't work for anyone else. So I always tell people before you go out and hire anyone, get an understanding of what it is you want. And if it's just money, go back to work. Go back to work somewhere else. Go get a job. So I feel like if you really want to be successful, you'll want to build a legacy for yourself, for your heart, for life, for your community, and make it profitable where it can continue and do it in a way that only you know how. That doesn't mean you can't hire consultants to do social media for you or whatever. But if someone says this is the way you have to do business, you have to call 10,000 people a day and you have to, like, that's not true. It's not true. If anything, it's out of a scarcity, fear-based mindset because I'm like, I called 10 people and I closed 10 sales. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're listening to the Get Sharp podcast, the show where we share the stories, stats, studies, and, well, let's face it, a lot of opinions from myself, as well as the subject matter experts I'll be bringing on, touching on topics from life coaching, mental wealth, bodybuilding, and more. Together, we'll learn what it really means to get sharp. Let's go. Today's show, we have the honor of listening to and learning from former opera singer, current business owner, lead trainer at iPEC, which stands for the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and we can call it iPEC, and life coach that helps you infuse you back into your life, both personally and professionally. Her 15 years of experience in branding, marketing, and running her own business will help you find and unleash your own creative genius. We discuss how people can learn to better trust themselves, accidental discoveries in physics, getting the seal of approval from the universe, and how singing, cooking, and coaching, they're all the same. As always, any articles, books, and or websites referenced in the episode can be found below in the show notes. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation between Wendy, Irwin, and myself. The one small favor I ask from you is that since we're still in the beginning phase of the podcast, if you find this helpful to you in any way, shape, or form, please, please, please follow, comment, and rate us on Spotify, and follow and like and comment on YouTube. Muchísimas gracias, and thank you. Wendy Irwin. If it weren't for you, I would not be a coach. I was on the fence when I met you, being a coach, being a therapist, and then you were that it factor that helped me get over that hump and realize, oh my God, there's more to coaching than just telling people what to do. Oh, that's not even coaching. So thank you for taking the time, going through the process of becoming a lead trainer. Anything that you think I missed on your background, can you just elaborate on a little bit more for the people that are listening?
The one thing you may or may not know about me is I actually started out as a classically trained opera singer. So that's the beginning of my journey from like high school and college, and it doesn't pay much. So shortly after college, I was like, I really love music, but I really like paying my bills and rent. I don't want to live with 10 people. I want to live alone. So I shortly went into corporate for a little while, for about 6 years in '94, and it was okay, but it didn't scratch the itch. I think I was a daughter of an entrepreneur. We used to call them business owners back in the 50s and 60s, but I was a daughter of an entrepreneur, and so that runs deep for me, of kind of being able to have freedom and your own personal ideas about stuff, and you can create what you want. So that really always appealed to me. So I want to say starting around 2004, which is right after my second child was born, my dad came and was like, you need something to do. So, because being a stay-at-home mom was not my, I enjoyed it. I love my children, but I like being busy and I like having my hands in stuff. So I actually had my own creative business for about 10 years where I made handbags and patterns and surface design. And then it was all based around antique cars. I found that most of the things that I really enjoyed doing in my business was actually mentoring other creatives. And there were a lot of young people around me, even though I was one of the older people in this kind of artsy crowd. I like mentoring younger people and artists that were not sure how business worked and things like that. That actually led me to pursue coaching for my own business because I wanted to be able to scale my business. And it was an artistic business, and art businesses are difficult to scale because you're the only person, right, who's producing one of a kind items. But the beauty of that is I stumbled upon iPEC through that process and got exposed to what coaching is. And as you can attest, is like day one of the first day of training, I was like, oh, yeah, this is what I should be doing. And it's funny, Angel, that you had said something about I wanted to be a therapist or I wanted, I couldn't decide. That was actually one of the things that I was, according to my Myers-Briggs in college, I was supposed to be like a counselor or a healer or in the healing profession of some sort. And at the time, that did not appeal to me at all. So, but it's interesting that it kind of came full circle almost 20 years later. So that's how I ended up at iPEC, learning to be a coach myself.
All right. So a couple things I would love to unpack. First off, you said it didn't appeal to you being a therapist or a counselor at the time. So yeah, was there a time that it did appeal more to you where you were like, okay, well, my Myers-Briggs, maybe there was something to it. And now that I've been coaching, maybe I should go and investigate the therapy route.
Yeah. So back when I took my Myers-Briggs back in 1987, coaching wasn't a thing, right? Coaching was not a thing. It just wasn't even an industry at that moment. And therapy, I'd had my own experience with therapy. And so, I mean, I don't come from the healthiest family emotionally, a very loving family, but, a lot of us can attest to like not all of our relationships are super healthy. And at the time, I just did not really want to be around that a lot. And I think that's why being a counselor or therapist didn't appeal to me. And it wasn't that I didn't love caring for people and helping people. I just wasn't in the place, it just wasn't the right time. Yeah. And so now I still don't feel that way because I feel like coaching is much more powerful because even my own experience with therapy and counseling between either for myself or even my family, coaching has done so much more for me in the past 7 years than 30 years of all the other modalities that I'd had introductions to.
Right now, the question that I feel compelled to ask you would be, since you first started coaching versus now, how have you surprised yourself in the style or approach of your coaching?
I think the level of trust that I have in not only myself, but my clients comes from a much deeper, more authentic place. And I don't know, let me see if I can make sense of that. But like sometimes you can pretend that you're not being judgmental, or you can pretend, when you very first start, some of those habits are hard to break. But now I can really, really, really lean into my clients' abilities to do anything and everything they want to do, my own abilities to be able to not only support them, but also hold the space if it doesn't work out the way they want to, right? So honestly, that sounds really silly, but I think trust is one of the biggest things. Trusting the tools, trusting my insight, trusting my clients' insights and intuition.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a means to an end in some ways. Like trust allows you to get in the zone more. Or trust itself allows you to be less judgmental, in your words, right?
That and like trust to be able to go deep if I need to with my clients without, fear of, them getting upset or, because there's this beautiful space of them trusting me. And so if I do have to lean into something that's more uncomfortable, then they also trust me to know that that's the space they need to go to as well, as opposed to feeling a lot of resistance. Yeah. And I think in some ways that's where you can release fear. If you can trust yourself, then you can release fear, which is what coaching is all about.
Yeah, those energy blocks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good. And in some ways, I feel like that was more of a question that, more so for coaches than people that are lost in their career. This would be more of a question for those people that are in between that cycle of change and they don't know what to do next. People listening to this either now or year, 2 years from now, let's just say that they're on the fence, similar to how I was before meeting and listening to you. So first off, what led you to making your choice for being a coach as opposed to staying doing what you're doing prior, which was helping artists and running your own business?
We're going to come back to this whole thing, trust. I think it's trusting that inner voice versus everyone else's voice. And I think that that's really a lot of times when we hit pay dirt with magic in our lives, when it comes to growth and expansion and getting the life we want and the business we want, it almost always boils down to this piece where you make the decision to trust your gut over what everybody else says you're supposed to do. And I can guarantee you, anytime that anybody's ever trusted their gut, they never regret it, right? I mean, even if something happens, they're like, you know what, I trusted my gut and this happened, but you know what, I know I can do something different or I can pivot or whatever. And regret only happens when you just ignore every small voice that ever screams at you or even whispers at you. And I think for me, the reason I decided to choose this, again, I had been kind of butting my head against the wall in my own business on how to scale it and how to do this. And then I realized, it became very clear, is that part of the reason that I couldn't scale it anymore is because it didn't serve me any longer. It didn't align with any of my values, which, and I love the creativity part of it, but it was skipping a lot of the other big values for me: connection, collaboration, so it was a no-brainer. It was like day one of coach training. I was like, why have I not been doing this my whole life? It felt like wearing the wrong size shoes my whole life. And finally somebody put the right size shoes on me. And I was like, I didn't even know it could be this way. And I feel like anybody in any industry, if they have that nudge and then they decide to take the risk and trust their instincts on it, it rarely fails for them.
Love that analogy. That is a beautiful analogy. Yeah. It's very Cinderella-esque as well. Yeah.
And I love shoes. So.
Oh, there you go. Makes sense why you brought it up.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how has entrainment, I'll break down what entrainment is in a second, but how has entrainment affected you in your own personal life, whether it be coaching as well as personal? And then I could break down entrainment afterwards.
Okay. So how you do one thing is how you do everything. So entrainment happens at work, it happens at play, it happens at home, it happens when I'm out at the grocery store. And I think the biggest power that entrainment has in anyone's life is really about knowing how you show up, understanding and being aware of the things you bring to the table when it comes emotionally or anything. And entrainment for me shows up the most when I'm at work, because a lot of times students and clients are looking to you for what's possible. If you understand and trust what's possible, then they in turn can also feel inspired and encouraged and empowered to believe and trust in what's possible. And for me personally, entrainment's really powerful because of my own personal life. Some of my kids have their own problems with anxiety and things like that. And so for me to be able to show up in a very grounded, loving, accepting, authentic way creates a space for them to know that they're held and supported and loved, even though they may not feel that way anywhere else. And I think that's the same for the clients as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. And then to briefly break down what entrainment means, took me a sec. I went through and I tried to find that quote. Was it Albert Einstein who mentioned? No, was it? I want to say it's either Albert Einstein or the physicist.
Yes, a Dutch physicist who he didn't know that he came up with it. He just began to understand the concept of it because he actually, I don't know if he invented grandfather clocks or clocks, but he basically noticed that clocks with pendulums, if you put them in a room at the same time, even if the pendulums were going at different times, they would eventually sync up. And what he didn't know at the time is that those pendulums put out sound waves, and those sound waves impact and entrain to each other. Any physical cycle, wave cycle, will entrain eventually. Sound, light, energy,
Yeah, water. Well, thank you for letting people know how it works in the practical, real world sense. So this is what I found. This is the Google definition of entrainment. Entrainment is a process that leads to temporal coordination of two actors' behavior. In particular, synchronization, like you mentioned, even in the absence of a direct mechanical coupling. So to paraphrase, it's when two waves come together and eventually synchronize so that if one is behaving in a certain way, then the other one links up. And then a good example would be the grandfather clock syncing. That's in a different room, syncing with the other one. It's fascinating. And you could see it in real world example would be when you hang out with someone enough, you end up developing their idiosyncrasies or their quirks.
Well, we actually use the biological of women and their cycles syncing up if they live together, and that's the way it works. But it's also, I mean, it's the same with circadian rhythms and all the things, because our bodies are made of water, right? And so it makes sense that biologically some of that would happen. And yeah. And I use just a practical, it's like if you walk in a room and some stuff has gone down, you can feel it, right? And that is a physical energy, right? And just on the other side of that coin, if you come in and everyone is excited and up, it's really hard to stay in that same energetic space if you're coming like in a low space, not to get entrained to that higher energy. And just understanding that helps you become more aware of what you bring.
Yeah, there's like an aspect of cause and effect where you become more aware that you can be the cause and people can essentially sync up to what you are putting out, or you could be the effect and sync up to what people are emitting. So it could be negative energy, catabolic energy, destructive, anabolic. The question that I'm looking at right now is, of all the professions of the world, out of all the professions in the world, you already mentioned two of them, opera and business owner. Why did you choose coaching?
Interestingly enough, I don't really see them as that different. And I realized that part of being a musician in general is just being in kind of a constant connection with other people. It's like a way of communicating and connecting on a different level. And actually training are very similar to that. You are connecting and engaging and tapping into a more, for lack of a better word, visceral place with other humans, because that's what music does. That's what poetry does. Any sort of art, you tap into something that's deeper than just, your logical brain. And I think coaching is a really good example of, even though it's talking back and forth, it's a very specific way you communicate. And there's a very specific way you connect. And so I think it really makes sense to me that those are very similar to me. And just like I do with students, I also do with clients. Or just like when I was an opera singer, that's what I would do with an audience, because it's not just you up there singing, you are actually connecting with every human being in a venue. And I don't know if you have any performance background or not, but if you've done any sort of performing at all, that probably will make more sense.
Yeah, my background, you could couple or relate what you're talking about in the sense that there's like a intimate relationship that you have, not just with yourself, but also with those that you're performing for, would be soccer as well as bodybuilding. I think I'm starting to pick up electric guitar, but I don't know if I'm comfortable enough yet just playing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think of it, I think of it like as cooking too. It's like a language. It's like an intimate language that you hold with someone that's subverbal. I don't know if that makes sense. Things are pre-verbal, I should say. So there's talking, but then there's also the way you talk. There's pitch, there's tone, there's all these things. So all of that is included in communication. It's not just words. So just like music is the same thing. Yes, you're singing notes, but you have emotion and you have pitch and you have sound and you pull people in and there's a story, right? And that's how people relate, through storytelling. And so in some ways you're helping a client create their own story and rewrite their own story. So in some ways I feel like it's the same. I don't know. For me, it's all the same. That's just the way I think, but it's maybe just packaged different.
Yeah, so from the sound of it, it sounds like there's a trend that connects all of them to one another, which is why you chose coaching, because you see the overlap. That still doesn't. I'm gonna press you a little bit.
Okay.
That still doesn't necessarily answer why exactly coaching as opposed to being a teacher of anything else that's not life coaching? Because
Hmm.
there's still that intimate piece that you mentioned
Yeah.
with teaching.
Well, first of all, I've always been fascinated by the human mind. Why we think the way we do, why we do the things we do. That's just something I've always kind of nerded out over, even as a young child. Like, honestly, I think I would have loved to have been like a neurosurgeon or understand the brain and things like that. I have zero recall. Like, I'm like Dory. I'm like Dory and Finding Nemo. Like, I would study, but I made good grades, but I could not do rote learning. Like, if you gave me a list of terms to remember, if there was no application for it, I couldn't remember it. So, but the mind has always fascinated me, what it does, how it copes, so that piece has always fascinated me. And this I love because it's coaching, it takes into all those factors of how our brain works, but puts in a very tangible, accessible, practical way to use it. And that's what I love about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's okay. Gotcha. Understood. Okay, so when did you know that coaching was what you wanted to pursue full time instead of just part time, like what a lot of coaches that I've seen at least choose to do?
Hmm. It's almost like it was never a decision I made. It was like a decision the universe made for me. I mean, I don't know if I told you this story, but when I was considering becoming a coach, it was like a 72-hour window. I'm just going to tell you, it'd be full transparency. I looked up iPEC and I kind of want to do this. And then I was looking at the price tag and I told my husband, I was like, what? I'm thinking about doing this, but I want to know what I want to do with it before I go ahead and pull the trigger on. And then I thought about it for about 24 hours, and I'd only have this conversation with my husband. And I said, you know what I want to do is I want to help people transition from corporate America or corporate into owning their own business. And I want to help them with not only the mindset of owning your own business, but also, at that point in time, I was doing a lot of graphic design. So I'd like to do logo design and like to help them with their website and get started, really set them up for success. I had that conversation, and I'm not lying to you. 45 seconds later, I got a text from my neighbor who said, you know what, I'm done. I cannot be a GM of a software company anymore, but I want to start my own barbecue food truck business, and I'm hoping that you can help me. So I got the seal of approval from the universe within a minute of making that decision.
Whoa. Okay, this is interesting. This is good. All right. You said within 45 seconds of
Yeah.
deciding that you were done and that you wanted to do something else, your neighbor texted you, and
Yeah.
then they essentially changed the trajectory of your career.
Yeah. Pretty much. And he became my first paying client 2 days before I started my coaching. I told him, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. When the coach, like, I know all the other aspect, but I don't know anything about coaching. He was a fantastic sport about it. And we still have lunch. I mean, like, but in a way, though, it's interesting because it took two people who had faith and trust in each other. He was just like, I know you've run your own business before, and I don't have a clue, and I need logo design. I need to know what steps I need to take. And I was like, well, this is what I'm about to take on. And he was like, done, sold. And that was it. And my husband and I, we still get chills when we think about it. And that is kind of a common theme in my life. When I finally just decide to give in to the intuition and the trust, the universe answers in kind, for exactly what, I needed or what should have been there, or, when it comes to money or anything else. Yeah.
All right. I got to ask you. So, what roadblocks have you encountered on your journey of coaching, or maybe it could be in personal life as well, where you didn't know the answer, but maybe not 45 seconds right afterwards, maybe 45 days, who knows,
Yeah.
45 months, right? Just some point in time. The universe took care of it for you, or there was some unexplicable sort of external factor that happened that helped you solve whatever problem or obstacle that you were encountering.
Interesting too, though, Angel, because of how I view things is not the same either. Like, I really don't view things a lot as obstacles or blocks or sometimes even challenges. Um, and it's interesting because it usually comes in the opposite. It comes the other way around. So I'll just say, for example, I was thinking, okay, I'd really I love working with business owners, but I also love doing improv and doing group workshops and things like that. And I was like, the one-on-one coaching is fun, and I would like to do something else. And one of my mentors had said, what would be a group of people do you think that would benefit from this kind of creative improv, style of coaching for teams more than any other industry? And I was like, engineers. Because they're typically they're mostly left brained, and even though they're intuitive and creative, but they spend a lot of time in the left brain. And I said, you know what, engineers, software engineers, IT professionals, those are probably my people. The next day I got an email from somebody on the West Coast that says, I saw that you were in a BNI group, which is a networking group that I was in. He said, and we're going to be in Austin. We're really looking for somebody to do a workshop. And I run a company that work with all of the project managers for a whole group of IT companies. It's just out of the blue. So it's like every time I follow my heart, the universe is like, that's right. That's what we're doing. As far as challenges in my professional life, not so much. I have a lot of challenges in my personal life, but even those have turned into opportunities for me to dive, just lean in deeper to trust and faith in myself, in my kids, in the support system I have, and surrendering to all of the ego pieces of thinking I need to or have to fix things. And it's funny how hard it is to let that go. But then when you do, you're like, why did I hold on for so long? Just letting it go. Yeah.
You make me want to ask you, how can someone, if they're not already listening to their heart, how can they actually listen to it so that it actually guides them towards resolve?
Well, I think what is that saying? The pain, people won't change till the pain of changing is less than the pain of staying the same. Or that's probably botched that saying, but that inner voice is always there. It's you either are stuffing it down or you're listening to it. And I have found that if you're stuffing it down, it takes way more effort. There's way more anxiety. There's way more misery. And for the most part, it really doesn't help because it's still there. It's kind of like a drippy water faucet, right? You can pretend to ignore it, but it's really not gone. You're just delusional if you think it's gone. So I often tell people, if you're going to step into your most authentic version of who you are, what are you doing? Right. And it doesn't mean you're leaving a job. It just means maybe you do things differently. It's kind of a math problem. If you are spending 90% of your day doing things you hate and only 10% things you love, well, no wonder you're miserable. So what if you started tipping that scale a little bit? What would that look like? Right. And I think in a way what that does, if some people are really holding on to what they think they have to do, it's those baby steps and it's those little tiny wins that build the faith and the trust in themselves and those little voices they have in their heart to take another step. So sometimes people take a big leap and sometimes people have to take baby steps, but I don't think we're put here to be miserable. I just don't. I just can't. I think that would be the silliest thing if people really believed that. And so, even if what would make you less miserable, because I work with a lot of people who are even in corporate. They're like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, let's figure out how you can do something else, right? It's not like quit your job and it's more like, well, let's figure out how we can create a life for you that works for you. And you'd be surprised how many people aren't even willing to entertain that. And it's all based around fear and lack of trust in themselves or the people that are around them. And I mean, it's the reality of what most people live with.
Yeah. So 90 and 10 people that are currently living in a miserable space or state. So if they're doing 10% of the things they love, 90% of the things they don't love, I want to ask, how's that serving them? Because that's what I've been asking lately since going through the program. And I'm curious, where are you on that scale of doing things you love versus doing things you feel like you don't want to, but you feel compelled to for whatever reason?
Yeah. So one, why do people do that? I think part of it is because they don't know any better, right? A lot of them is they've been told to, right? You got to hustle, you got to do these things, you got to pay your dues, you just got to work until you can retire, then you can enjoy yourself. I mean, there's all sorts of messaging there, not including our own internal messaging, right? That's external messaging, the stories other people tell us that are true, they think are true. So there's a lot. And then there's the internal subconscious piece, or maybe I don't deserve to be happy or whatever. So for me, am extremely lucky to be doing now what I love doing. And I have been able to pretty much throw myself into it, and I didn't even see it coming. Like if you'd asked me 10 years ago, well, A, do you want to speak in front of people? Like, no. Like, I could sing in front of people, but speaking in front of people was something different. And then I came from a long line of people pleasing women, like that's kind of was my thing. So I had to unpack doing all the things just because no one else wanted to do them, which made me extremely busy, tired, and unhappy, to creating better boundaries. So now I can fill more time with things I love and less time with things I don't. There are still things I don't love to do, yes. And that's just to me part of living. And I do them out of being grateful and loving and loving my space and the environment. But I've also become really keenly aware of how valuable my time is. And so if I find myself doing things I really don't enjoy doing, and it's something I can easily hand off to someone else and they enjoy doing it, well, why would I deprive them of doing it? Right. So it's like, shut up and take my money. I never look back. And I also encourage business owners to do that too, because I've seen so many people bootstrap themselves into debt, or not debt, but into not having a thriving business because they're not willing to spend, $12 an hour for someone to come and do something that's taking them 8 hours a day to do, and so it's just things like that. But I actually really enjoy my life. I enjoy what I do. And when I stop doing that, then I'll pivot. And that's the beauty of what I know now, is I have all those options. Like, I love what I do, but if 3 years from now I go, it's just not hitting all the buttons anymore, and I'll just go searching for something different and feeling the freedom to do that, which I think there was a time in my life where if I'd changed careers more than once, I would have felt like, I don't know, flaky or something. And now I don't have that tether anymore. I'm just going to keep enjoying my life until I die in whatever fashion I want to. And then even then after.
Yeah, that's really big. That's huge. Especially, I think that's like a generational thing too. My parents' generation attached to the idea that you should have maybe 1, 2, 3 jobs max, and then just stay there, ride it out, and then get that Social Security, get that pension, and then live however you like after that. But then my generation, millennials, that's where my generation says, no, we're just going to keep like 4 years here, 4 years there, 4 years here, 4 years there. And by the end of it, it's like, oh man, you've switched careers like 5 times and switched jobs like 20.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that has to do is not just with the employees, but employers. The loyalty is gone. There's no benefit to staying at a company for 20 years anymore. Used to, you get pension and you get a watch or whatever. Now it's like, that's not on the table really anymore. And I think that used to have a lot to do with it. But yeah, that it definitely generational, because I think that part of the reason for me, even in college, it's like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? So when I went to college, I was like, I have no idea. But now they're asking kids like at 12 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, I don't want any 12-year-old who knows exactly what they want to be. Like, they don't even know who they are, let alone what they're going to be. But that's another rabbit trail.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, so how did you get to the point where you're okay with just, now, like you said a couple minutes ago, you wouldn't mind just in 3 years from now, say it's not scratching the itch, being a coach, you wouldn't mind just going and doing something else. Like, how did you get to that point, that realization?
I think this is probably going to sound weird. It's like, I spent a lot of my young life unhappy with my situation, whether it be with work or even relationships. And once you kind of get a taste of the good life of being happy and peaceful and fulfilled, like, there's no reason to go backwards. Right. So I feel like for me to be able to create the life I want is absolutely there for me. So I do that every day. I mean, in some ways I change careers every day, in the sense that how I do it is different every day. Who I do it with is different every day. How I view my life and the people around me is different every day. So that's kind of, in a way, it's like I'm changing careers every day. Even though I may be doing some of the same things, I'm showing up differently every day. And that's fun. I love that.
That's interesting. Every day is a day to change careers or change how you approach your same career.
Yeah. Well, the career is mine. I've created what I do. So every day I change it. I mean, it'd be like, if, for example, if you went and you made donuts every day, you get the donuts out, You get the dough a certain way, you put them in the thing a certain way, you fry them a certain way, you know. Whereas if you're like a chef, you can any ingredients all day long, however you want. You can make new meals every, you know, you can make and create what you want. And I feel like that's kind of what I am. I'm more of a chef of my life with different ingredients every day and something new to experiment with every day. Not to say donut person couldn't be a chef, but I didn't want that metaphor to fall apart.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, what about the bakers? I mean, what about these guys? They could do.
But yeah, but you know, I should say, if you made widgets every day and you made the same widget every day, and they said, "Here's these 5 parts, you have to put them together," you know, that would make me nuts. But yeah, it's more you get to create, and I think that creation piece of being an entrepreneur is huge. That's the one thing that being an entrepreneur and then working with them, one of the main values that I've discovered is the freedom. They want the freedom to do what they want, work the hours they want, but they're all creators. They want to create something from nothing, and I think that piece is important.
Agreed. Yeah, trying to maintain a balanced mindset or a realistic approach towards what being an entrepreneur or business owner actually goes through, whether it be on a day-to-day basis or let's go day-to-day basis. What would you give people who want to start their own business, seeing as how you've done that even before becoming a coach? What would you tell those people that want to start their own business to prepare for that they often overlook?
Well, if it's just a coaching business or if it's just a regular business, I guess I would have to differentiate between those two.
Well, you know both of them. Yeah.
I do know both of them. So I think one of the things that I dealt with myself that I feel like I serve my clients now in supporting them in this is that there is 100 people willing to tell you how to do your business right, quote unquote. And it's almost always wrong. And so, because that's what works for them. And whatever works for them may work for 1% of the population and it won't work for anyone else. So I always tell people, before you go out and hire anyone, get an understanding of what it is you want. And if it's just money, go back to work. Go back to work somewhere else. Go get a job. So I feel like if you really want to be successful, you'll want to build a legacy for yourself, for your heart, for life, for your community, and make it profitable where it can continue, and do it in a way that only you know how. And that doesn't mean you can't hire consultants to do social media for you or whatever. But if someone says this is the way you have to do business, you have to call 10,000 people a day and you have to, that's not true. It's not true. If anything, it's out of a scarcity, fear-based mindset, because I'm like, I called 10 people and I closed 10 sales. I don't know what you're talking about. Right. And so really making sure, if it's only about the money, go back and get a corporate job. And I think that sounds terrible, but otherwise because then you're just working longer hours and doing something, because being an entrepreneur, you don't work a 40-hour work week most of the time. You can work a lot less, but it's going to take some time because you're creating it from the ground up. So there's that piece. And I think the only other piece of advice I would have is don't try to do it alone. Have groups of people that you can talk to. It doesn't mean you have people pull into your business, but go have meetings and chats and beers and dinner with other business owners who understand kind of what you're going through. And that collaboration and support is really important, I think.
Man, thank you. That is good. That's great stuff. You know what? That's so good. I'm going to take that, edit it, put it on TikTok, Instagram, just that little piece alone. You'll see. All right. And then to wrap it up, since I want to be respectful of your time, we have roughly 2 to 3 more questions. Technically, I have 10 more, but I'll ask you the ones that I find are somewhat more relevant. What are the negative consequences coaching has had in your life? As much as we don't want to talk about it, I feel like they're still there because there's pros and cons to everything.
I think it's hard to uncoach yourself. So what I'm saying by that is, like, you spend your day listening for how people show up, their mindset or whatever. So just hanging out with friends, sometimes it's hard to just be Wendy without a coach hat on. And so, or a lot of times just me being really, really quiet. Because, I want to be a friend, and sometimes it's hard because it's who I am now. It's not like I am a coach and I put my coach hat on. It's like, no, I'm always this person now. Like I always see you all these things and I'm going to ask you probably uncomfortable questions. And now if somebody just wants to complain about their spouse or their job, I just sit there and let them do it. And I think that's the hardest thing is just to sit there and be quiet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a good one, man. And then just a little side note on this one. One of the biggest things, I try to remind myself this every single day when I can, aka when I am with somebody who likes to talk a lot about themselves. And so the main teaching that I try to implement when I can around others is don't give people advice unless they explicitly ask you for it. And it sounds so simple, but it's really hard. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's the art of being quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I have a non-poker face, so whatever I think is right on my face. But most of my friends know that about me. So yeah. So I may look away.
Oh, that's good. You have a tell.
Yeah. Yeah. If you say something, I'm like, oh, look at that. Look at the time. I gotta go.
That's good. All right. And then to start wrapping us up, what advice do you have for people on the fence about being a coach?
To me, the best place is on the fence is just to listen to your gut and try it out. If you don't like it, do something else. It's like no harm, no foul.
Okay. Now here's the last question. What advice do you have for people who don't know what they want to do? So they're not on the fence. They're not even close to the fence. They don't even see the fence. It's nowhere to be found. They're in like a desert, maybe lost in the ocean, if you want to use analogies, but they don't know what they want to do. They don't know the skills. They don't know the passions. They just know that they don't like what they're currently doing because it's sucking their soul.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I tell them get out of that box as far as what you think you should do and just explore. What do you enjoy doing? What could you do all day long and not get tired of? What lights you up? Not to be too trite and use those coach terms, but what really lights you up? And, if it's playing music, if it's adding numbers, I mean, whatever, and then you start kind of making a list of all the things that you really enjoy doing that you can just lose yourself in. And then you just kind of start connecting some dots. Well, how does this make sense? Right. And I always tell people, and then try some of those things out. You don't have to marry it. It's like, well, I might like dancing. We'll take a dance lesson, see if you like it. I think so many people take their actions so seriously. Like they have to have they have to have a goal in mind. And sometimes you just need to explore for the sheer sake of exploring. And I think because we had so many goals put in front of us from such a young age, we don't even know how to play anymore or how to explore or how to imagine. And people who are that locked down, and that's usually what it is, they've been told from a very early age what they should do, and they've never been allowed to explore who they are. And it may not happen overnight. It may take a year or so, but you have to start somewhere, right? You got to start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely have to start somewhere. It's like that metaphor of the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, and then the second best time is today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to close this up, where can people find out more about you, what you're up to, and if they want to connect with you, where can they go?
Oh, I was going to make a joke and I was going to say something about a federal prison, but I didn't. You can reach me at wendy@wendyirwin.com. I have a somewhat quasi personal / coaching Instagram, which is Wendy Irwin Coaching. I do a little bit of everything on there. And I actually have quite a few Facebook Live videos on my Wendy Irwin Coaching Facebook page. So there's like 2 years worth of content and videos there. So if anybody was interested to know what I'm about, they can go there.
Perfect. And I'll put the links to all those places in the show notes so people can find you a lot easier. Other than that, is there anything you'd like to, like any last messages? Maybe, I don't know, maybe like the wisest thing you've ever heard in your life that you want to say?
I'm very famous for saying, no, one of my favorite things to do is I tell people it's time to find your own stank and then put that on everything you do. And I think that's really the best way you can start becoming who you were meant to be in the first place, or remember who you were meant to be in the first place. So everybody has their own special stank, and it's just time to put it on what you do.
Yes. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
for
Angel.
your energy. Thank you for your teachings. Thank you for putting yourself out there, just being open to playing around with your career, with being impromptu, since much of this was impromptu. And then, just really wearing your heart on your sleeve. And I guess, in other words, not having the best of poker faces. Yeah.
Thank you, Angel. I hope you have a fantastic evening. And thank you for this. This was fun.
And that just about does it for this episode. Thank you for listening again. And if you like this episode, please feel free to share it, like it, leave a comment on Instagram, YouTube, at Get Sharp Coaching. If you'd like to find out more, you can go directly on our website, getsharpcoaching.com. And if you have any interest in truly transforming your life through life coaching, or as I prefer to call it, life strategizing, then reach out to us there. Looking forward to talking with you soon. And until then, thank you, and have yourself a phenomenal day.